My Lord, ladies and gentlemen, Petrina, thank you very much for your introductory comments. And in terms of what I call the Freedom Association, I like to think of us as sort of professional troublemakers, really. But we sort of like to take on issues that perhaps other organisations don't like to touch. In fact, we're not just about the European Union. As Petrina mentioned, in fact, our two other main campaigns, we have three main campaigns. One is our Better Off Out campaign, which I'll talk about a little more in a moment. The other is our Axe the TV tax campaign, and the other is on Magna Carta, which, and I'm sure you'll all realize that there's a great connection in these with the European Union. The Axe the TV tax is about getting rid of the TV licence, and we all know how Europhile the BBC has been and is, and of course it has been in receipt of money from the European Union, which I'm sure has influenced it. The Magna Carta campaign, again, is, of course, that's big news this year, but we've been talking about it for a long time. Not quite for 800 years, but it sometimes seems like that. The Magna Carta, of course, is all about the traditional British liberties that we came to cherish and to take for granted in this country. Take for granted too much, I think. Over in the United States and in the Commonwealth, I think they appreciate it more. But of course, the European Union has really overtaken so much of that, overruled so much about that, and so much of what the EU stands for is really inimical to Magna Carta. Now, I would just like to say a few words about your organisation, the CIB, because it's an organisation for which I have massive respect. I think that it's absolutely admirable what you're doing, and the purpose of this meeting, trying to get all our groups working together. And the CIB, I think, has a tremendously good record on that. I like to think that we also have a good record on it, but I would like to pay tribute to everybody at the CIB, particularly to the main people involved in that, to Petrina herself, of course, to George for the fantastic work he's done, Edward, a tremendous guy, and John Pedley, I think, is a great new signing, if I may put it like that, for you. But in particular, somebody I greatly admire is Lord Stoddart, who I think is a real inspiration, and it certainly has been for me, and I think is for many others as well. So you know, I think all of you at the So I do think all of you at the CIB, you know, should hold your heads high and be very proud of what you're doing. And I'm not just saying that to be polite, because I think the whole purpose of this, of getting us together on the EU, is absolutely vital. And we all know how many squabbles there have been in the past and how many sort of petty rivalries between different groups. And there really is no time for that. We have to concentrate on the goal, which is, of course, leaving the European Union. Now, I just want to say, I mentioned our Better Off Out campaign. I just want to say a little bit about that, because that started off really as a way of essentially, I think, separating the men from the boys, if I may put it like that, if that's not too sexist. I certainly got very frustrated by the number of particularly conservative MPs who claim to be Eurosceptic. And what a convenient word that is, because it really covered everybody, from somebody who would make a great noise about the need for the European Union to only meet in Brussels rather than in Strasbourg. And I see some of these Conservative MEPs still to this day campaigning in a huge way on this. Of course, we all know that so long as France exists, that is never going to change. And I think it's one example of the really quite fraudulent Euroscepticism around. You pick something to criticise which you know is never going to get change, and it gives you some brownie points. So you can say to your Eurosceptic constituents or party members that, oh yeah, you're a good Eurosceptic man. So one of the things that the Better Off Out campaign was designed to was to as I say, to separate the men from the boys. And the first MP who did that was Philip Davis, the Conservative MP for Shipley, who announced that he was in favour of coming out of the European Union. It seems extraordinary, doesn't it, in a House of 650 MPs, that before that nobody, certainly in modern times, nobody had done that. And of course, when we launched, a number of other MPs joined that. And John, in his excellent speech, has already mentioned, I think quite rightly, Austin Mitchell, the Labour MP, who's also a signatory to our Better Off Out campaign, and somebody who I think will be very, very sorely missed, actually, in the House of Commons. So this was not a party political issue, but it did separate the men from the boys, and it made it much more difficult for all these Conservatives masquerading as Eurosceptics to actually persuade people of the fact. So I think that's something that was worth doing, and I'm quite proud that we've done. And also the actual term Better Off Out has come into use. You see it, I see it on websites and in the press, and it's a term that's become used. I certainly don't claim I invented that. I think probably Lord Pearson may have been the first, but inevitably in any success, a few people claim that. But again, before that, by and large, with the honourable exception of people like the CIB, the very few people would talk about the outward. And now it's actually in quite common parlance. So again, I think that was something worthwhile that we did. And one of the things we wanted our campaign to be about was to be positive. We call it the positive campaign for leaving the European Union. And there's a reason why we didn't call it we'd be worse off in. Because we all know, and by the way, I don't intend to criticise the EU in this speech. I take it for granted that all of you, understand the reasons for leaving the EU. So I'm not going to sort of insult you by trying to persuade you why you should be out. But the thing is, for all that's wrong with the EU, we do need, and certainly this was a point that John I thought made very well. We do need to persuade people that that actually life would be better outside. Now, I'm quite sure that everybody in this room, or virtually everybody in this room, is convinced of that. So again, I'm not going to try and explain all the benefits of being out, but that is a message that we have to get across to the public, and I think that is really vital. So at the Better Off Out campaign, we're moving on really almost to sort of stage 2 of our work, and we are really trying to reach what I call the Joe public, or Joe and Joanna public, I suppose that one ought to say these days, because there's no doubt, as John said, that the only way of us getting out in reality, we know technically we can get out with a vote in Parliament, and that's absolutely correct technically, but in reality there's going to be a referendum. And so what we're trying to do now is to prepare the ground for the Out campaign. And so what we're trying to do is to build up grassroots activists, and of course I know that many of you, I think, would be in that category, so it's absolutely vital that when that referendum happens, we don't know when it's going to be. There's been talk that it might be earlier than we had thought, but looks like 2017 and I think it's a rather unlikely if David Cameron gets back in as Prime Minister. Obviously, if Labour gets in, it's going to be later. but we have to work on the assumption that it'll be earlier rather than later. So our aim now is to go around the country, and we have recently taken on, and I don't know if he's hiding behind a pillar there or if it's my dodgy eyesight, but Rupert Matthews, oh, there he is, Rupert. It is my dodgy eyesight, apologies. We've taken on as our new campaign manager, Rupert Matthews, and Rupert actually, he actually has written a book about campaigning. And he is what I call a true campaigner, and is doing some great work for us. What we're doing is going around the country, having sort of mini road shows, trying to get into the high streets right around the country, and putting across that positive message that we would be out. We've got leaflets which we did polling research for, and we've tried and tested them to see what works with the public, and so we're trying to do that on a really large scale. The main work on that will come after the general election campaign, because, let's be honest, you're not going to get many politically active people out in the streets now for something other than their own party's campaign. But that is our aim, is to spread that right around the country with the intention of building up a really large database of convinced activists, so that when the referendum comes, in the lead up to the referendum campaign as well, we've already got this large cadre, if I can call it that, of people all around the country ready to campaign, because we must realise that obviously the opposition, the pro-EU side, are going to have staggering financial resources behind them, the force of the establishment, and everything that the EU can throw at us, and we will be the underdogs in that. Let's not be afraid to admit that. But underdogs can often win. So we're really concentrating on the practicalities of trying to get us ready for when that big moment comes. With the moment, I think many of you here have been waiting for 30 years or so. I mean, even I am pretty ancient, was actually too young to vote in that last referendum in 1975. And of course, a whole generation has been denied any say in this. So it's so vital that we actually be ready practically. We can have all the best arguments in the world. If we haven't got the troops on the ground, we're not going to win this campaign. So that's what we're concentrating on now. And Rupert has got all manner of things to get our campaign activists going. I think he's even got some hoodies. I don't know if he's trying to win over Mr. Cameron on that. But maybe we should send him. Maybe we should send him one, Rupert. I don't know if anybody will want to hug him in it. But it is important to build up morale of this group, and we really are looking at trying to get large numbers on this. And of course, we want to work actively with all other groups, Bruges Group, the Business for Britain, CIB, and the many other groups around as well. So that's what we're up to. And I just want now to have a look at again, the practicalities of how we go about things. How are we going to win this referendum? So I think the thing is, so we're trying to build up this team, but of course if we're actually going to win that, that's just the sort of first requirement, so that we're ready to take on the fight. But how do we go about engaging others? And I think it is essential, and this is why I think this meeting is so important, that we do all start to realize that we must look beyond our own little groups. And I would say, I mean, I'm an unashamed Thatcherite, but I have not the slightest problem in working on this with people who might actually be on the far left, for example. There is a greater cause involved here, and I think we must all be prepared to put our own sort of personal views on this aside, there's absolutely no reason at all, in my view, why we can't all work together. And I think it has to be all about targeting, essentially. Sorry to sound like sort of marketing man on this, but I think it's because there has been a real problem in the last couple of years, and I don't wish, I'm sure there'll be some UKIPers here, and so it's not a criticism of UKIP, but one of the effects of the rise of UKIP in the past couple of years has been actually for support for our position on the EU. I say our, overall, the anti-EU side. That has fallen. And I think the reason for that is quite simple, because anybody who isn't actually a UKIP supporter has become, it's polarised debate. So the people who consider themselves maybe Labour or Conservative or Lib Dem, who might otherwise have had quite anti-EU views, have in many ways sort of moved back, and they thought, oh, well, no, we don't like UKIP, so therefore I'm pro-EU. And that has been a real problem. Now, the truth is, UKIP is not going to go away, so, and nor should it do. They've done some very good work on this, and they talk a lot of sense on it. So what we have to look at is how do we involve all the different groups together in the most effective way. And that's why I think what we need to do is have targeting on this. There are certain people to whom Nigel Farage, let's be honest, he's an absolutely brilliant speaker, has a huge appeal to. I suppose he's the classic Marmite character, isn't he, really? And so he and UKIP must be key parts of any campaign, and so it's absolutely vital we be able to work with them. But I think we also have to look very carefully at how we appeal to those people who might be turned off by what UKIP are doing and what they stand for. And I think we have to realise that it isn't impossible to do both. There are, for example, there are people in business who are very concerned by, and I know it's a problem John was mentioning while we were talking, the enormous amount of legislation that membership of the European Union causes them. And that's not an area UKIP has concentrated on that much. And I think you could have a quite different campaign, maybe a more business-led campaign. Business for Britain has done fantastic work on this, which gives completely different reasons for being out of the EU from those which Nigel Farage might be giving to people who are keener on the UKIP message. It doesn't make one of them right or wrong. And I would go so far as to say, I mentioned I'm a Thatcherite, but I also see no problem in part of the campaign being extremely critical of some of the, what I call the sort of big business fat cats. And I don't mean in that genuine entrepreneurs such as John or Dyson, for example, and some people who, Tim Martin at Wetherspoons, often, of course, those are the more Eurosceptic types. But what there is, I think, a legitimate concern amongst people in this country about sort of bigger corporations which don't pay their fair share of tax, for example. And so even speaking as a Thatcherite, I don't see any problem at all in that becoming a major part of the campaign when we go about it. And I think we all need to be prepared to accept that we need to tackle different parts of the different groups in different ways. And so I think if done properly, that can work. So the next thing I just want to talk about is how we actually reach the public. And the thing is, we obviously have to reach not just the convinced Eurosceptics, And John was talking earlier about the likely outcome of any negotiations that David Cameron might go into. I agree with him that there will be some concessions, and of course they'll be bigged up, and we'll go through that usual charade whereby the EU leaders will make out that David Cameron's forced them into these outrageous concessions, and they've most reluctantly given way at the back, and he's humiliated them and got such a fantastic deal for Britain. It's pure pantomime, but some people fall for it. So there will be some concessions, we can be quite sure of that. But what we have to win over is those people who at the moment, when asked in these, you'll have seen all these polls where I think that people are given these three completely false choices. In almost every poll, they'll say, are you happy being in the EU as it is? And not that many people will say yes to that. Then they'll say, would you like to be out? And a slightly larger number will say they want that. But then they get given this opportunity, but would you like to be in with everything perfect, with us having exactly what we want and paying virtually nothing? Well, of course, that's what most people go for. But it's a completely false option. It's like offering people the choice between a sort of Mini and a Ferrari and saying, which would you rather, a Mini or Ferrari, if the price of the Ferrari is the same as the Mini? Well, of course, people are going to go for the Ferrari, but it's never going to happen, only in La La Land or in Cameron Land. So what we have to do is try to win over those people who, after that renegotiation has happened, will, I think, say, well, hang on, yes, I was hoping that we were going to get this concession and that concession, and we were going to get control of fisheries back, and they were going to scrap the common agricultural policy and all these things. When none of those things have happened, we have to make a persuasive case to those people. And I think what we need to do, and I come down again to this sort of targeting, we do need to work particularly on the areas where we're not reaching people at the moment. And I think the single biggest concern there is, and this came up in the Scottish referendum, is that in particular women, I think, are tending to be more concerned about the risks, the supposed risks of leaving the EU. So I think that is an area we particularly need to target. It doesn't need to be done in a politically correct way. It just needs to be, we just need to make arguments that will, I think, have a rational appeal, particularly to women, but there are other groups as well. We just need to look at those areas where there are weaknesses. But I'm going to end with something that I think we should never forget in this, and something that I think too often politicians do forget, particularly on our side of the thing. And actually, it brings me back to, I mentioned Lord Stoddart earlier. I don't think we should ever forget the emotional appeal. I think that is absolutely vital. Just talking fact, we all know that on the facts and figures, we would be better off out. There's no question about that in my view, and I think we have all the figures to put that case. But let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, we don't always decide everything just on money, on rationality. And I think there is a strong democratic and emotional case to be made for this country regaining its freedom. And I don't think we should ever forget that. And I don't think we should ever be afraid to put that across. So I thank you again, the CIB, for kindly inviting me here. And I think it's so essential. This is the first step to us all working together. But we must look at the practicalities of how we win people over, but never forget that we have right on our side on this, and we shouldn't be afraid to say that. Thank you very much.